What was your first anime? When I ask people that question, I usually get answers such as Sailor Moon, One Piece, or Naruto. After all, those are some of the most well-known animes that were streaming in the 90s and the early 2000s. But as someone who was unaware of anime being a thing streamed on American TV, such as Cartoon Network, my first anime only became my first when I found out about it on YouTube. My first anime was Demashita Powerpuff Girls Z. Now clearly, when looking at this show, Powerpuff Girls Z, otherwise known as PPGZ, was a clear anime ripoff of the original Powerpuff Girls series. I was very aware of the Powerpuff Girls series as a kid. I wasn't a huge fan of Cartoon Network as a kid. I watched channels such as Disney Channel and Nickelodeon much more. But the Powerpuff Girls were very prominent in pop culture when I was a kid. So when I happened to see a YouTube video around 2007, I want to say, with teenage Powerpuff Girls drawn in what I later learned was called anime style, I recognized them right away as Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. Little did I know that this was a full-blown series. I remember seeing clips of the show that had a Boomerang logo in the corner, the sister channel of Cartoon Network that played reruns of older cartoons, and being really upset that I never saw Powerpuff Girls Z on the Boomerang channel before. Later I learned that it only aired on that channel in a specific country and not in the US. I learned later after that the show wasn't even originally in English in the first place. The original aired in Japan, in Japanese, of course. I had originally found the English dub of the show when I first got into it. So that brings me to the point of this video. I want to discuss the episodes of PPGZ. This was my first ever anime and still is one of my favorite shows to this day. It's not perfect by any means and it's definitely not the most popular, but it's what got me into anime after all. It was also my introduction into magical girls, so I want to talk about each episode and explain if they were one of the better ones or of the lesser quality ones. I also want to point out the difference between the sub and the dub of the show, as the dub is super easy to access here on YouTube, but the dubbing team made huge amounts of changes to the original show. So I want to discuss why this show had me hooked as a kid and why I still regard it as such a special show. So let's get ready to talk about Powerpuff Girls Z. So before starting to go into each episode, I want to point out some key differences between the Powerpuff Girls original series and this series. In this story, at least in the Japanese version, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup have different names and are not sisters who were created by the professor. They are also middle school age instead of kindergartners. With that out of the way, let's get into the first episode, which isn't yet an origin story. It's more of a snapshot into the status quo of the show. The show starts with Professor Utonium working in his lab with his kid son. Yes, Professor Utonium has a son instead of daughters in this story, and he briefly mentioned something called Chemical Z or something like that, being something to do with the Powerpuff Girls having superpowers. That's when they learn from the mayor that a kindergarten is being attacked by the bad guy Mojo Jojo, who is a similar character to Mojo Jojo of the original series, just taller, sometimes, and not as smart as him. That's when Professor's son Ken tells his robot dog Peach, or Poochie in the dub, to call for the Powerpuff Girls. We cut to the local middle school and to see that Peach was able to make an alarm on the three girls' belts go off, and they quickly make an excuse to leave the class to transform from their average school clothes to their matching colored superhero outfits. Also, a side note, I heard the designer of the hero outfits from this show was also the creative behind Sailor Moon's iconic hero outfit. So to transform, they take out the compact out of their belts and they open them up to show a screen and a few buttons on the inside. It reminds me of Ladybug's yo-yo from Miraculous Ladybug, and of course Sailor Moon's compact, the iconic one. They use that to start their transformations and act out snapping their clothes in place similar to iconic magical girl transformations. So after transforming, the girls check their compact to see a video feed of Mojo Jojo terrorizing kindergartners. The girls use their superpower shoes to fly in the sky, leaving a colored trail behind them, similar to the original Powerpuff Girls show. Before the girls make it to the school, Mojo has trapped the children in cages and starts stealing from them. Then the Powerpuff Girls show up, and as an already famous superhero team in the story so far, the children beg for autographs. The girls agree, until they see Mojo ask for an autograph. They decline, as he is the villain in the situation in the first place. He gets angry and tries to start a fight. The kindergartner teacher shows up to try to fight him off, but Mojo yells at her so loud she passes out. That's when they take the battle to the sky. Mojo attacks first, but the girls fight back with their weapons. This is where I want to take a moment and talk about their weapons. In the original Powerpuff Girls series, the girls have all sorts of physical powers, like lasers, strength, and they can literally fight with their bare hands, or stubs, if you want to call them that. But in this show, the girls each have their own special weapon. Blossom has a yo-yo, similar to the yo-yo Ladybug, has a miraculous ladybug. Bubbles has a gigantic bubble wand, kinda that works similar to Sailor Mercury's powers in Sailor Moon. She can clog villains' views and even trap them in bubbles. Then Buttercup has an oversized hammer that can unleash green shockwaves. I always thought it was neat that their weapons were based on children's toys, a yo-yo, a bubble wand, and a block stack hammer. Now, something that I love about this series is that the girls are so oblivious to the damage they cause during fights. In a show like Miraculous Ladybug, Ladybug is able to just use her magic to restore everything to normal when the city gets damaged. But in this show, the mayor actually gets worked up over the fact that the city is being destroyed. Another quick side note, it's ironic to me that the mayor is a regular sized guy in the series compared to the original show where the mayor is almost the same size as the girls when they're literal kindergartners. Also, Miss Bellum's still in the story, but they made her blonde and she holds a clipboard over her face most times with a lip decal on the back to represent her face. I love that she's still too pretty to be shown on camera in this series as well. As the fight goes on, the girls start getting exhausted from fighting. The professor, of course, seems worried, but Mojo's super glad about it, until he can't find them anymore. That's when he sees the girls took a break to eat ice cream. Now, I always found this part hilarious. They even get Mojo to stop to eat some ice cream. The professor suddenly also wants ice cream, and Ken leaves to go get them some. The mayor says it's silly that they stop to eat ice cream until Ms. Bellum brings some ice cream for the both of them as well. It's just such a silly concept that they pause everything just to take an ice cream break. They all sit and enjoy their snack until the teacher pulls up on a bike to try to get the kids free. That's when Mojo stops and unleashes his robot mech. He hops inside and picks up the teacher flying off. The girls quickly finish their ice cream and head out after him. Now that they had a snack, they are stronger than ever and beat Mojo till he's sent flying into the sky, leaving the teacher falling. She almost lands straight on the caged children until the girls catch her. They break the lock on the cage and the kids are free. All is well, and the mayor is still distracted by his ice cream. And that's the end of the first part of episode 1. Personally, I loved this episode. I thought it was a perfect example of what to expect from the trio of superheroes and how a typical battle will take place. I love how unserious the battle gets when they all take a break for a snack, and it really shows how goofy Mojo Jojo is in this series. After this episode, we will soon learn about how the dynamic became to be. In the second part of the episode, we do a time skip to before there was any bad guys or superheroes in the city. The dub calls the city New Townsville as a reference to the city of Townsville from the original show, but the Japanese version just says they're in Tokyo, Japan. We start out at the professor's lab as he and his son are trying to stabilize their chemical X. But in the Japanese version, they just talk about how they're trying to make the chemical stronger. It's another reference to the original show where Chemical X is what caused the Powerpuff Girls to be born. They take a snack break as they're still trying to solve their problem. Professor eats a bun that Ken brought over, making Ken's robot dog, Peach, jealous. Feeling bad, Ken lets him have one. I also want to mention that the dub didn't think we would know what a bun is and called them Zubra cakes, or something like that. The dog dances around the bun until he trips and accidentally drops one in the tub of Chemical X, causing it to change and shine a bright light. The professor is scared at first, but then he gets a sample of it to see if it's stabilized or any stronger, which is confirmed to be the case. Ken is excited, but the professor is a little let down because it wasn't figured out because of him and more so because of an accident. Then the computer prompts them to rename the chemical, and Professor decides to go from Chemical X to Chemical Z. See why it's called Powerpuff Girls Z now? Get it? Get it? Anyways, right after registering their new chemical, it suddenly starts to snow even though it's summer. Just then, the mayor calls on a video screen to explain that weird weather anomalies are happening all over. It's raining where it never rains, it's snowing where it never snows, and right where they are, icebergs are starting to form all over. Ken gets an idea to use their new chemical to strike the weird weather outside. The professor says the chemical is way too new to use, but Ken gets on a cannon and fires the chemical at an iceberg anyways. As Ken fires the cannon, Professor screams for him to stop, but it's too late. The shot hits the peak of an iceberg, causing white and black particles of the chemical to disperse in the air. We then follow one of the white rays that exploded off the iceberg. We see a young girl leaving a shop with her hands full of stuff she brought, and she admires some cute boys running by. She gushes over how cute the guys are and then heads off to the park to enjoy some of the snacks she bought. Right as she goes to eat a piece of chocolate, she sees a little girl with a yo-yo almost get hit by the light ray we saw earlier. Assuming the kid is in danger, the girl we know to be Blossom rushes to protect the little girl from the ray. This ray causes her to transform into her superhero self. After transforming, she's super confused. This reminds me that I want to mention, in the Japanese version, she shouts her superhero name, Hyper Blossom, when transforming. In the dub, she just says Blossom. This transformation is a bit different too, because it's a solo for Blossom, compared to the previous episode where it was a group transformation and end pose. We then cut to a bunch of boys complimenting a girl named Miyako. They say Bubbles in the dub. Everyone finds Miyako so cute and pretty as she walks by after school, but she just politely passes them. Then she happily goes clothes shopping and skips around town until she runs into a little girl blowing bubbles. She stops to admire them until another white light ray is headed towards the little girl. Miyako does the hero thing and goes to protect the girl and transforms into rolling bubbles. This is where I want to point out that we learned Bubbles' civilian name is Miyako. We later learn that Blossom's name is Momoko and Buttercup's name is Kaoru. Anyways, Bubbles is just as confused when she transforms into her superhero outfit. We then cut once again to another scene. This time, a crowd is admiring a person on their skateboard. This is of course Kaoru, aka Buttercup, as she swerves past everyone out of the school gates. That's when she sees a little boy playing with a block and hammer toy on a park bench. Almost get hit with another white light ray. Just as it went for the other girls, she transforms into the superhero outfit and becomes Powered Buttercup. She is confused and also angry to be in superhero clothes. Something else worth mentioning is how the weapons the girls end up with are all weapon versions of the toys each kid that they saved were playing with when they got their powers. It's also supposed to reflect the fact that each girl is hero-like in the sense that they'd risk their own safety for the safety of a random child, proving they are fit for the job of superhero. It's not the greatest setup ever, but when you compare it to a similar show such as Miraculous Ladybug, it seems more reasonable to me. Also, side note, I'm going to be comparing this show to Miraculous a lot because I think it took a little inspiration from Powerpuff Girls Z. So the way Ladybug and Cat Noir get their powers is by helping an old man with a cane when he falls on purpose to test if they're worthy of superpowers. Then later, he chooses to supply them with their powers because they helped him. In this show, however, it's framed like it was coincidence that the girls were granted powers because of their hero-like actions. To me, that is a better reason than giving a teenager superpowers on purpose because you tested them once on morals randomly. Anyways, comparison aside, let's continue the story. After we watch each girl get their powers, a fourth white light goes straight for the professor's lab and hits Peach. This causes Peach to be able to talk, because before, the robot dog could only bark. So now we know how all the white light rays work. But now it's time to learn what happens when something gets hit with a black ray. We watch one black ray hit a monkey at the zoo. This monkey becomes Mojo Jojo. So the black light causes whatever it gets hit to be evil, and the white light causes whatever it hits to become superpowered, or in the robot dog's case, to be able to talk when it couldn't before. We then go back to the park with Blossom playing with her new super yo-yo and showing off to the kid she just saved. She doesn't understand why she's so skilled in yo-yoing because she was never good at it before, but then she gets distracted by a crowd of people running from a bunch of animals ambushing the park. We learn that this is because Mojo is releasing the animals at the zoo. Blossom is freaked out by the animals until she happens to use her yo-yo to escape up a tree. She's impressed and she still doesn't understand her powers yet, but then she sees Mojo scurrying around from up in the tree. Mojo finds a cookie that a lion stole from Blossom, so she jumps down and yells at Mojo. She then does a complete 180 and teaches Mojo the way she likes to eat her snack, and he just absentmindedly follows along. After enjoying the snack for a few seconds, Blossom realizes what she's doing, and they both jump back. Blossom can sense a dark energy from the light rays that hit Mojo, as well as Mojo can sense a white energy on Blossom. That's when they realize they're enemies and start fighting. The professor manages to get video feed of what's taking place in the park as the battle plays out. The mayor also witnesses this take place, but is concerned about the city being damaged. They fight some more until Blossom finally releases one more large attack, causing Mojo to run away crying. He happened to be next to the car that the mayor was sitting in as well. Once Blossom sees she won, she sticks out her tongue at Mojo and herds animals back into the zoo. Blossom thinks she did an amazing job defending the city until the mayor steps out and asks her to not be so reckless next time. She looks around to see the damage that she caused during the fight. When the mayor tells her who he is, she freaks out and runs away from him in a panic, worried she's going to be in trouble. We then see Bubbles and Buttercup, and how Bubbles is skipping around loving her new powers while Buttercup is mad to be dressed in a dress so suddenly. The professor talks to his son about what just happened, and they both leave to pick up the girls and figure out what's going on with the three of them. And that's where the story ends on the first episode. So I want to point out how hilarious it is that the weather was such a huge deal before shooting the iceberg, and that one blast just completely destroyed the weather situation. It's funny that it was a solution to the problem, but now a new problem happened where many monsters will be made from the black rays hitting the town. Also, it's kind of jarring how there seems to be an endless stream of video coverage for the professor and the mayor to keep up with when the fights happen. And they're able to see the girls one at a time, each on separate cameras. Like, where are all these cameras located to get all this video feed? But the weird part is they didn't really have any video feed on where the black rays ended up, so we're gonna end up with like a villain of the week style episode layout. This episode definitely feels more rushed than I remember when I was younger, but they did have a short time slot to fill. So the rest of the girls joining the team happens in the next episodes. Episode 2 starts off with the Professor, Ken, and the mayor and Miss Bellum in a van that has Blossom tied down to a table. We can assume Blossom was hard to get a hold of as she ran off, so they had no choice but to detain her. Blossom is of course upset about being held hostage and is scared of the Professor and Ken until they finally explain to Blossom that the reason they need her is to figure out what happened to her when the white light hit her. She finally convinces them to let her out of the restraints, and once she's sitting up, Peach sees Bubbles outside of the window of the van, skipping along happy about her new powers. Blossom is fascinated that Peach can talk, and Professor explains that the robotic pup was also hit with the same rays as her, aka the rays that they caused to explode everywhere. What's weird to me is how the earlier episode, Professor was watching all three girls on a video monitor before meeting them. But when they all see Bubbles outside the van, they all act like they had no idea another girl had superpowers. This seems to be an error in the dub specifically, because when I watched the original translation, the professor seems more confused about Peach calling Bubbles a friend before even meeting her. He seems more aware of Bubbles and wants to bring her in the lab. I think the dub sort of created their own continuity error on accident doing this. I also appreciate that in the original, it seems to be more Blossom's idea to be a superhero than the rest of the people in the van. She comes straight to the conclusion of fighting crime, where in the dub, they made the characters immediately assume they're going to be superheroes. It's kind of hilarious how they have a jump in conclusion like that in the dub. We then cut to Mojo after he was beaten up by Blossom. He is complaining about losing when Bubbles happens to be skipping in front of him without looking and lands straight on his head. She continues to skip as Mojo tries to get her attention, but Bubbles is so carefree she even thinks her and Mojo are just playing a silly game. Mojo keeps trying to fight her, but continues to fail, chasing her as she skips carefree. We see that Ken, Blossom, and Peach are watching this quote-unquote fight take place. Peach growls as he can sense the dark aura on Mojo. Also, a side note, I love that in the Japanese version, Peach always says "da-one" at the end of each sentence. It's just so cute. Blossom immediately recognizes Mojo and points it out. That's when Ken assumes that he's been affected by dark rays from the explosion. Knowing this, they figure Mojo is a real threat to Bubbles and hurry to get her. Driving up to the two, Mojo accidentally jumps on top of the van, dropping his stolen candy on the roof. Blossom realizes the candy she had just bought was stolen by Mojo and goes to get it back. Mojo gets mad that he's run into Blossom again as they scramble to take as much candy as they can, until Mojo grabs Blossom's portion and runs off with Blossom flying after him. Back to where Bubbles is, she drops off a stray cat that she was skipping with and continues down the path. Mojo runs away past Bubbles with Blossom chasing him. Bubbles assumes the two are just out having fun like she is, but in reality, Blossom is chasing Mojo. He even starts throwing rocks at her, but once he picks up a rock too big, Blossom throws a rock at his rock to knock him over. Blossom is content in her victory until Bubbles comes up and tells her she's being mean to Mojo. Blossom then explains that he's a bad guy, and you can tell by the aura on him, and you can sense it. And worst of all is that monkeys can't talk. Now that's what shocks both Bubbles and Mojo himself. Blossom then tells Bubbles that now that they have superpowers, it's their job to fight the creatures like Mojo. Bubbles happily agrees and the battle starts. Blossom starts using her yo-yo, but Mojo starts shortening the distance between them. Bubbles tries to help but doesn't know what her weapon's for. She chooses the not-so-obvious plan and throws the bubble wand like a boomerang. Surprisingly, that plan worked and it knocked Mojo out, but Blossom points out that she thinks that the weapon's not meant to be used like that. After all that goes down, the van pulls up and grabs the girls. They tie up Mojo in the van stretcher and head to the lab. As they head back to the lab, they pass Buttercup on the street without seeing her. She's cold and complaining about her hero costume. Then we get a fourth wall break while Blossom and Bubbles show up and talk about how cool having powers is. And that's the end of the first half. This one was always a fun episode to me. I love how carefree Bubbles is and how she doesn't recognize a threat in Mojo. Blossom and Mojo fighting is so goofy and it always gets a chuckle out of me. Definitely a good follow-up to the first episode. The second half of the episode starts with the girls being tested in the lab and Mojo is laying tied up on the floor. They confirm that the girls have been affected by Chemical Z, and in the dub, the professor specifically calls them Powerpuffs. The original show just mentions to them that it's because Chemical Z that they have powers now. Blossom and Bubbles are super excited, but then Bubble points out that she might not always want to be dressed in her superhero clothes and asks how she could go back to the way she was before. The professor admits he doesn't know how to revert them back. They mention how the light rays seem to be connected in some way to Peach, so they decide to scan the robot dog next. While the professor is working, Blossom and Bubbles start floating around and wake up Mojo. Blossom starts to mess with him until the professor calls them over. They leave the room for Peach to watch Mojo. Professor then uses a ray beam to revert the girls back to their civilian selves and is happy the process worked. As they talk, Blossom, who is now in her civilian form, so we'll call her Momoko, exclaims that she's upset that her powers were taken away. Mojo overhears Momoko yelling about losing powers and assumes his powers are going to be removed as well and freaks out. Peach stops him from escaping though. Back in the other room, Bubbles, aka Miyako, realizes that she still has the belt part of the costume on, so their powers aren't completely gone. Professor takes Compact out of Blossom's belt to check it out and opens up to see the device. He then calls Peach into the other room, leaving the disheveled Mojo on the floor. Professor scans the Compact and then tells Peach to call for the Powerpuff Girls. The dog says the phrase and it causes the Compact to fly back onto Blossom's belt and the girls automatically transform again into superheroes. They realize that in order to get the girls back to being superheroes, it requires the dog to say the right words in order to make the transformation happen. When the professor explains how the process works and how they can switch from civilian mode to hero mode, the girls get really excited to be Powerpuff Girls. Then Bubbles brings up how she doesn't know how her weapon works. Peach points out that you can blow bubbles out of it. And Bubbles gets carried away, blowing bubbles all over the lab. Eventually, the bubbles start trapping everyone inside them. Bubbles keeps blowing till she realizes she trapped everyone floating in the air. Blossom tells Bubbles to let everyone free, and Bubbles agrees, but then she realizes she doesn't know how. After they all realize they're going to be trapped for a while, they notice Mojo escaping his ties and go after him. Bubbles tries to catch Mojo in a bubble, but fails to trap him. Mojo almost gets out the window, but Bubbles decides to throw her bubble wand again, smacking Mojo in the head. However, he's still able to jump out the window. Mojo runs down the street, away from Bubbles and Blossom, as they chase him, only to run into Buttercup. He starts yelling at Buttercup, which only makes her angry, and attack him. Mojo goes flying into the sky. That's when Blossom and Bubbles catch up to Buttercup. The trio officially meet. And that's the end of episode 2. I want to point out some things I find funny about this continuity-wise. In this episode, we learned that they're called Powerpuffs, but the professor doesn't explain why that's their name. It seems to be a dub-specific thing, but it's goofy because he pulled that name out of nowhere. He also only calls them Powerpuff Girls specifically once he learns they can transform and re-transform out of their costumes. In the original release, it doesn't seem to be as jarring as they don't get called Powerpuff Girls until Peach tells them to transform. The original show makes it seem more like it was Blossom's idea to use these powers to be superheroes as well, instead of the professor and the mayor coming up with it instead. The dub is slightly jumping the gun on announcing them as heroes, in my opinion. Something that I know will change down the road is how they transform. This episode makes it seem that only Peach can cause them to transform, but later the professor will make it so that they can transform on their own whenever they need to. But this episode made me realize that most times when Peach calls for them, it just causes their belts to light up, and then they have time to run to the rooftop of their school to transform. This episode made the transformation seem almost instantaneous. I know it's not a huge deal, but it would be pretty bad if Peach called for them and they just automatically transform in the middle of their classroom. Anyways, it's still neat to see how they talk through the process of their powers and how they work and how they're slowly learning everything about what's going on from now on. Also, Bubbles trapping everyone and then literally not setting them free is so hilarious. Now on to episode 3. We start episode 3 with Buttercup finally meeting the professor and Ken. She unleashes her rage on them as she hates wearing skirts, and they are terrified. Everyone tells Buttercup that she looks cute when she wears a skirt, which causes her to start swinging her hammer like crazy. Professor finally uses his equipment to return Buttercup to her civilian self, Karu, who is dressed more like a tomboy. She's happy, but Miyako and Momoko agree that she was cuter dressed more girly. Karu sits with the girls, asks what's going to happen to them from now on, and the other two explain that they can now transform and de-transform in order to be their superhero alter egos and protect the city from monsters. Momoko goes on a tangent about how they were lucky enough to be granted powers from Chemical Z and how she switches to her alter ego form Blossom to fight crime with her powers. Miyako follows suit and announces that she takes on the name Bubbles when becoming a hero. Karu tries to join in with talking about how she becomes Buttercup, but starts to get upset imagining herself wearing that skirt again, as she doesn't care for girly stuff. She starts to freak out about the skirt and claims there's no way she could join the Powerpuff Girls Z. This part is when we learned the girls' first and last names, as they each introduce themselves. I'm not going to attempt to say their names because I know I'll say them wrong, so just read their last names on the screen. Miyako tells Karu to calm down after saying her first name. She then goes on to explain that she's seen Karu before at school and always thought she was super cool with how athletic she is and how she looks up to her. Momoko mentions that she never knew Karu before, but she has seen Miyako at school. She brings up the fact that so many students send her love letters and that she's super popular. That's when Miyako puts the dots together that they all attend the same school. I love this reoccurring gag where Miyako is always a bit slower at coming to a conclusion that everyone else has already realized way before her. Karu points out that she is aware of both Momoko and Miyako. She explains that Momoko is a super huge superhero nerd and she knows how popular Miyako is at school. Momoko is flattered that Karu remembers them, but in reality, Kaoru found the two of them annoying as they aren't like her. They're more giggly, girly girls compared to herself. Momoko and Miyako link arms with Karu and exclaim that the three of them are a perfect match, much to Karu's annoyance. That's when the mayor shows up at the lab. Before talking about this next part, I want to point out how this section gave us a bit more insight into the personalities of each girl. They prove that they are a lot different than the girls of the original show. Momoko is more of a comic book lover and boy crazy, unlike original Blossom, who's all about girl power and being super smart. Miyako is more of a popular girl, but is also pretty shy and loves cute stuff. Bubbles, from the original show, is more of a baby and a little more outgoing. Karu is a straight-up tomboy and does all things sporty, unlike Buttercup from the original show, who is tougher than her sisters, but still embraces the fact that she's a girl much better than Karu does. Back to the story. This part's kind of strange, as both Miyako and Momoko have met the mayor, but all three act like they don't know who he is and start guessing where they've seen him before. It makes for a funny gag when they guess that he's a hairstylist, and we cut to him in the lab dancing with scissors in his hands. It seems to be a way to point out that he's a tad goofy. That's when Ms. Bellum introduces himself as the mayor, and she's his assistant. The mayor then tells the girls it's their duty to protect the city as the Powerpuff Girls Z. Momoko and Miyako agree happily, but Karu sticks out her tongue, not wanting to join. Everyone is flabbergasted about this and don't understand why. Kaoru reflects that it could be fun, but she doesn't like acting girly or working with Miyako or Momoko, who are super girly compared to her. The mayor tries to tell them all to agree about being heroes again, but suddenly Miyako and Momoko start gushing over candy stores and cute clothing shops they've been to. The professor and Ken watch in disbelief at how distracted the girls got. Buttercup also watches speechless. The mayor tries to interrupt the conversation until Blossom brings up a really good Chinese restaurant in the area, which piques the mayor's interest. Suddenly, everyone joins in on the topic of how good the restaurant is. This leaves Kaoru watching, shocked at how off-topic everyone got. Even Peach and Ms. Bellum join in. Kaoru gets so worked up at how crazy everyone's acting about something as simple as a restaurant and complains that she can't stand people like this, and she announces she's leaving. Everyone stops talking, upset she's attempting to leave. Kaoru tries to tell them that Blossom and Bubbles will be plenty of people to fight the crime and doesn't want to be a part of it. Kaoru leaves, but Ken isn't having it, so he tells Peach to call for them, causing them to transform. If you think about it, it's kind of messed up that Ken just made them transform against their will, especially for Kaoru, who just wants to leave. Blossom and Bubbles gush over their costumes again, but Buttercup complains she looks like a girl. That's when Bubbles points out that she is a girl. Buttercup gets mad and Peach starts laughing at her. This makes Buttercup angry and start to chase Peach as revenge for making her transform. Buttercup causes massive damage with her powers, and Blossom and Bubbles try to stop her, also causing destruction. The chase eventually leads outside and through the professor's home. That's when Blossom gets the idea to trap Buttercup in a curtain. Eventually the chase leads right back to where it started, but before destruction can happen again, Blossom and Bubbles catch Buttercup in the curtain. Once Buttercup calms down, she explains that it actually felt good to fly around, and that maybe the powers aren't so bad. Blossom and Bubbles agree. That's when the mayor officially names them the Powerpuff Girls Z and gives them the title of Defenders of the City. They finally all agree to work together. This is when Miss Bellum lays some ground rules. This is where the dub differs, so I will go over the original first. She first tells the girls that no one can know about their secret identities as Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. They must refer to each other as their hero names when transformed. The second rule is to not break the lab, but it's a little too late for that. Last rule is for the girls to not fight with each other. So in the dub, they totally go without the girls having secret identities, and everyone knows who they are, which is such a weird change to make. I know the girls keep the names Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup for the sake of translation, but acting like there's no secret identity is so weird to me. I remember that really confusing me as a kid who watched the dub first and then the sub, not knowing who the heck Miyako, Momoko, and Kaoru were when I first watched it. This change then causes the first rule that Ms. Bellum says in the dub to be that they always have to protect the city, which kind of feels redundant. Anyways, the girls get mad about all these rules being placed, so they decide to make their own rules. They all make rules about how they can hang out at the lab, eat all their snacks, read magazines, or watch shows on TV. And that's how the first half of this episode ends. So I want to talk a little bit about this one. As a kid, Buttercup was always my favorite of the girls. I wanted to be like her so much. Now that I'm older, I've definitely embraced my more girly side, but I loved how she thought everyone was crazy with how easily they got distracted, and it totally makes sense that if it weren't for the situation, Kaoru would have never bothered to be friends with girls such as Momoko or Miyako. Still, it makes me happy to see Buttercup get so angry at Peach, and if you think about it, it's kind of deserved since Peach kind of forced them to transform against their will. Also, Buttercup is still my favorite, but that's besides the point. Now let's move on to the second half of the episode. We start the episode as Momoko leaves for school when her younger sister shouts that she took the wrong lunch. We now know that Momoko has a younger sister. We then see Miyako leaving her old-fashioned house with her lunch her grandma packed her. Last, we see Kaoru leaving for school before her brothers exclaim that she forgot her lunch and lowered it on a rope out the window for her. Later, we learn that she has two brothers, but we don't know 100% at this point. Now that the girls know they go to the same school, Momoko and Miyako meet up outside and start gushing over how their lives have changed. Eventually, the conversation switches to them questioning if the professor has a wife since he has a son, which I find so funny that they just randomly bring that up. Kaoru pulls up to the school on her skateboard and seems annoyed to watch Miyako and Momoko giggling at the building, but is grateful they at least don't have class together. That is until the principal randomly switches the classes around for them to all be in the same class. Miyako and Momoko are super happy, but, Kaoru isn't. Also, this is when we first meet the teacher, Miss Keen, who is the show's version of the teacher, Miss Keen, from the original show, obviously. All the boys love her, but the girls are jealous, especially the girl who looks like Princess Morbucks from the original Powerpuff Girls. She's another character that was carried over from the original show, but we'll learn more about her in other episodes. We then learn the class switching in the middle of the year was due to Miss Bellum requesting it so the girls would get along. That's also when we learn that the principal of the school is actually the mayor's younger brother. As the day goes on, we see the girls chatting about class during second period when someone brings up how the zoo animals were set loose yesterday and how a random girl saved the day. They all talk about how cool it was until Momoko almost spills the beans that it was her who did that. Until Miyako and Kaoru stop her. They bring her out in the hallway and yell at her for almost blowing their secret. So the dub frames it as if the kids at school also want superpowers and Momoko's about to tell them how they can also get superpowers. They make it so Kaoru and Miyako just don't want anyone to know about Chemical Z specifically, not their secret identities because they don't have secret identities. Again, really going out of their way to make them not have secret identities in the dub. Goofy in my opinion. When it's finally lunchtime, Kaoru pulls out her lunch excited to eat when suddenly Miyako and Momoko group up to eat with her against her wishes. They then each brag about what kind of food they brought all excited. We then cut to the professor's lab where they see a news broadcast of Mojo dressed as a waitress destroying a restaurant. Ken tells Peach to call for the Powerpuff Girls, causing them to not even get one bite of their lunch. They hurry to find a place to transform, but keep finding rooms with people in them as it's the first time they've ever needed to transform at school. Then they finally go to the roof and get ready to transform, not without complaining that they wish they could eat their lunch. Momoko checks the screen on her compact to see that they need to fight Mojo. We then see Mojo eating all the food in the restaurant until the girls show up. That's when Blossom uses her new catchphrase she came up with, and the other two act confused by her. Mojo completely ignores them, the girls get mad at Mojo, and then he runs out of the restaurant. The girls chase him until they end up at a construction zone. The girls lose sight of him until a crane starts moving. We see Mojo is the one operating the crane. I want to add that it's so funny that Mojo is wearing a safety helmet to control the crane that happens to fit over his huge head thing. Like, where did he get that? Mojo makes them fly around dodging the crane's hook as they get exhausted from being hungry. Mojo laughs at them for being hungry and starts to brag about how much he got to pig out before. Angry about being tormented with the idea of food, the girls grab the hook of the crane and wind up to hit Mojo with it, complaining how it's because of him that they are missing their lunch. Once the crane hits Mojo, they go in for an attack fired up over wanting to eat. They cause the crane to crash into the water, and the girls talk about how they're getting better at teamwork. But then Mojo shows up driving a boat with missiles on it. Where the heck did he get a boat that sends missiles into the air? This made me laugh at how ridiculous it is. Each girl uses their power to redirect the missiles back at Mojo, causing him to be sent flying into the sky, although that definitely should have killed him. I guess him having powers makes him have a better chance at surviving something like that? I don't know. Everyone at the lab cheers about the girls winning the fight. The girls then see on a clock that lunch has only 5 minutes left and they hurry back to school to try to eat while they can. Alright, this one is such a fun one to me. I love how Kaoru wants nothing to do with Miyako and Momoko, but you can tell she's already starting to warm up to them. It's cool to see how their first day at school with this responsibility goes as they can't eat lunch and they have to struggle to find a place to transform. And the fact that Momoko already almost revealed their secret identities to the school, it just proves that even though having powers is super awesome, balancing your normal life with it won't be so easy. And that's it for episode 3. Now on to episode 4. We start with Peach rushing to beg Ken for food. I just thought of this now, but it's kind of hilarious that Peach is a robot, but still needs to eat food. Like, the first episode, he wanted a bun to eat, and I didn't think about the fact that he's a robot dog. Anyways, they use this really fancy machine to automatically make food to eat, which is kind of silly. I guess the professor can make anything. We then see that the 3 girls are sitting in the lab taking full advantage of their side of the deal by snacking, watching shows, and reading articles. Ken immediately gets annoyed that they are taking up the space, specifically Miyako using the computer Ken was originally using. Ken tells Miyako to leave his computer alone when a delivery for a cake appears. Momoko grabs the cake and leaves the bill for Ken to pay. Ken gets furious about everything, and the girls don't understand why. He gets mad and unplugs their electronics and gives Momoko her bill back, which makes them upset. The girls start acting like they're his older sisters and he should respect them. He explains that he's an only child and his dad teaches him everything he needs to know. He's also got like a college level intelligence at only 8 years old. As Ken starts to brag, the girls go straight back to what they were doing. He naturally gets even more mad and starts fighting Kaoru over the TV remote. Little does he know, Peach is starting to eat his lunch. Right when the battle is heating up, Professor walks in the room. Ken wants to go to him first, but the girls beat him to it and start tattling on him. They start switching the story around, acting as if they were there to keep Ken company, and start fake crying. This, of course, enrages Ken, but the professor just apologizes. He explains that he's a father who tends to spoil Ken because his mother isn't around. They make it seem like Ken's mom's dead, but we later find out she's just not living with them. She's working as an astronaut. That's when the girls get a sneaky idea. They'll play the part of Ken's mother. Just as they start to torment Ken, he points out that they probably need to get back to school. They freak out, checking the time, and run off back to class. That's when Ken finally notices that Peach ate his food. On the way home from school, the girls start talking about how they are going to parent Ken and agree to take turns playing mom. The next morning, Ken gets woken up by what he thinks is his mom until he gets up from bed and sees Momoko in his room. Ken didn't seem to think that the girls would actually pretend to be his parent, but here's Momoko addressing Ken like a mom would. Momoko tells Ken to get up and get ready as she has chores to do. It's kind of silly that Momoko is taking the role of mom so seriously that she's bothering to vacuum his room. I'm sure the professor would appreciate her doing chores. Ken starts to leave the room until Blossom starts freaking out over some action figures Ken has and how cool they are. Ken gets mad that she starts touching his stuff, but Momoko wants Ken to play with her as his mom. She gets really into it, but then Ken reminds her that she was planning to clean. Just then, Peach runs in saying there's a big problem. We then see a room full of bubbles. Momoko freaks out as the washing machine is overflowing. Turns out she dumped the entire container of detergent in the load of laundry that's causing the bubbles to be everywhere. Like I said before, it's pretty silly that she felt the need to keep up on chores when pretending to be Ken's mom. Then Ken tells her that she's unfit to be his mom. The next day, Ken gets woken up by someone claiming to be his mom again. This time, it's Miyako. She takes a much more polite approach and bows when speaking to him. Then she hands him some interesting clothes to wear. He turns her down, which causes her to cry, and decides to wear them out of guilt. Ken comes to the kitchen to see the professor also got coaxed into wearing Miyako's unique outfit. They then wait for Miyako to make breakfast, which takes longer than expected. Miyako tells them it'll still be 30 more minutes until the food's ready, but Ken points out that school should be starting soon, causing Miyako to freak out and run for school to make it in time. Later we see Ken and Kaoru jogging in the park. Ken is exhausted, but Kaoru is fired up. Ken says he can't keep going anymore, which causes Kaoru to whack him with a giant paper fan she's been carrying with her. She is more fired up than ever now to whip her quote-unquote son into shape, and off they go again. Once they get back to the lab, Kaoru pretty much gives up on the mom role, leaving Ken to cook dinner as she doesn't know how to cook, and she just goes to watch sports instead. Ken tells Kaoru that she's completely unfit to be a mother. He complains that the girls all make terrible mothers, and he's leaving. This episode is much more unique than the other episodes so far, as the full episode is one big story instead of the episode being split into two separate stories. When the story picks up, we are at a terribly rundown shack where somehow there is a cable TV access for Mojo to have. I don't know how he's able to get that in this house he's most likely snuck into and isn't paying for, but either way, he's watching some medical drama on TV while eating cup noodles. He gets touched by the scene on TV about some family getting a happy ending or something, till he realizes that doing this won't exactly lead him to world domination. He gets angry and kicks the TV, causing it to literally explode. Poor guy. After that, Mojo starts walking around town all upset. He starts to get jealous of all the families he's seeing when walking around. He gets an idea when he sees one particular family at an ice cream truck. He decides to put helmets similar to the one he's wearing on them, causing them to turn into monkeys. I love how he's supposed to be kind of dumb, but somehow made helmets like this and just happened to have them in his cape for a moment like this. It's just goofy and definitely played up for laughs. The new monkey family laughs in disbelief at first, but then when they realize what happened, they start to cry. Mojo walks up to them, which scares them away, only to pull out a banana and eat it, laughing about how his newest invention was a success. This leads to Mojo starting his rampage of turning people into monkeys. As Mojo raids the ice cream truck, he's at, he hears a voice. It happens to be Ken nearby, complaining about how his not-so-helpful mom's villains were. Mojo looks to see Ken watching the family, looking slightly jealous of the family nearby. Ken scoffs and accidentally kicks a rock right at Mojo. That's when Mojo leaps out and gives Ken his special helmet he made to make Ken his special servant monkey. Ken naturally freaks out when he realizes he's a monkey and starts running around like crazy. Mojo says they will take over the world together. Ken backs off wanting none of this, but then when he tries to take off the helmet, he gets electrocuted by Mojo. Mojo then continues his plot of change people into monkeys. Back at the lab, the girls can't find Ken anywhere. That's when the mayor calls the lab telling them what Mojo is up to. They specifically point out that Mojo is targeting families in particular, which is to tie into the mother plot of the episode. The girls transform to go take care of the Mojo situation. At a carnival, Mojo is turning all the attendees into monkeys, with Ken sadly following behind. That's when the Powerpuff Girls Z show up. They notice Mojo has a little buddy by his side. Unable to talk, Ken tries to get them to notice it's him, but it doesn't seem to work. Mojo then tells Ken to turn the girls into monkeys, but of course Ken doesn't want to. In the end, he has no choice. Naturally, the girls are able to dodge the attempts though. Mojo gets mad at Ken for failing to put the helmets on any of the Powerpuff Girls. That's when Mojo summons one of his robots from underground. It's an octopus-looking robot with a bunch of tentacles. One of the tentacles grabs Bubbles. Blossom and Buttercup go to save her, but get sprayed with ink from the robot and get plastered to the wall. Already, Mojo seems to be stepping up his game with these inventions. Besides the first episode, this is probably the first time we've seen him really use inventions like this. Mojo then goes to throw a helmet on Bubbles, but Ken jumps up and blocks her from the helmet. Mojo gets mad and zaps Ken, leaving him falling, but giving Bubbles a chance to escape and catch the monkey Ken before he hits the ground. She realizes he's being Mojo's servant against his will. Peach shows up and says that the monkey smells like Ken. Peach tells Bubbles to take the helmet off, but Ken shakes his head. Mojo laughs and stupidly says that those helmets can't come off unless you destroy his remote. He immediately regrets spilling that information, and Bubbles goes to get the remote. Blossom and Buttercup also finally rip free from their goo traps to help. They send Mojo flying and then break the controller, turning everyone back to normal, including Ken. After watching everyone celebrate, the group talks about how they are like a big happy family. The girls say they're better suited to be like older sisters than moms for Ken. That's when a debate starts of who's the oldest sister in that situation, which then opens a can of worms about who is the leader of the Powerpuff Girls Z. And that's where episode 4 ends. This episode is getting us into the energy of the weekly boss style story. It's no longer about the group forming, but about how they function and where the conflict stems from. I appreciate that the theme of this story stuck and stayed the whole time, about cherishing your family and how Mojo's plot stemmed from a similar situation to Ken's, causing him to be forced into servitude for Mojo. Also, watching the girls play mom was pretty funny. In my opinion, Miyako was the best mom, and she really didn't mess up. She just ran out of time. Either way, this was a pretty solid episode, and we got to learn a lot more about Ken and see him grow as a character. Now on to the last episode for this video, episode 5. We start off the episode with Mojo back in that old tattered house having an existential crisis, trying to recall some memories of his life before being hit with the black ray. Also, he's not wearing his cape over his body, so he's like super short and small, like he was in the original show. The only thing Mojo is certain of is that he was a normal monkey before. Suddenly, he gets a vague memory of a hand holding an orange. That's when the need to eat an orange drives him crazy. He frantically runs out of the building in search of oranges, until he finds a window display full of oranges. After scaring the fruit seller, he breaks the glass and begins eating the oranges. At the lab, we see Peach freaking out over Mojo, causing trouble, and wakes up Professor to get permission to send the Powerpuff Girls Z. I guess this proves that Peach can sense when Mojo is doing something wrong, which I don't think we've seen before. In this situation, we even see that they doubt Peach when Ken says he didn't see anything going on when he was in town. Either way, they call for the girls. Once again, the girls get called during lunch, but this time they're less annoyed about it and get up to tell the teacher these goofy reasons to go to the nurse. They don't even act like they're sick and run off. Then the girls make it to the roof and transform. As the girls head off, we see Mojo sitting on the broken food display eating oranges. Shop owner is more mad about his brand new glass being broken than Mojo eating the oranges. That's when the girls show up and Buttercup smashes right through one of the standing glass windows, freaking out the shop owner. The girls introduce themselves with Blossom's goofy catchphrase, so I guess we can assume they all decided they liked that off screen. They say they are the fighting, love, science legend, Powerpuff Girls Z. That ends up sticking later more. They say this only to be met with tears from the shop owner as he threatens to sue the girls. He then calls the mayor's office, he rants to the mayor, and then hands the phone to Blossom. Blossom tries to explain, but the mayor tells him just to apologize. While all of this goes down, Mojo starts to take a nap, angering the girls for getting them in trouble. Annoyed with Mojo, Blossom whacks him with her yo-yo, causing Mojo to immediately have more memories flood back. He recalls when he was in the zoo, a man used to offer him oranges, but when Mojo would go to get it, the man would always take it back and eat it in front of him. Apparently, this guy would torment him a lot, even with other fruits. The girls get mad for him and want to know who the jerk was. That's when the fruit shop owner announces it was him. He laughs that the monkey was so dumb for falling for the same trick every time, and that same monkey just happened to become Mojo. The girls blame the shop owner for why Mojo hates humans and demand he apologize. He agrees and goes to do so, but Mojo's already gone. The fruit seller doesn't seem too worried, so he tells the girls to leave. Until a Mojo robot jumps down from the sky. Mojo angrily announces that he's going to make a human zoo for anyone who's ever been mean to him. He will then get even more revenge by teasing them with food the way he was teased. The girls explain that they get where he's coming from, but revenge isn't the answer. Even they make mistakes and have to apologize, just like the shop owner did. The owner offers Mojo a lot of fruit as a peace offering, and he accepts. The girls then realize they still haven't eaten lunch and get hungry. They talk to Mojo and tell him he did a good thing. Mojo thanks the girls and offers them some fruit too. Only to pull the same stunt on the girls that he had happened to him by swiping the fruit away. Angry at being tricked like that, the girls start attacking him and launch him into the sky. We then end the episode with the shop owner calling the mayor, complaining the girls were eating all his fruit. And that's the first half of episode 5. I've always had mixed feelings on this one. First off, that the fruit guy is such a jerk and totally deserves what he had coming, but it's also kind of messed up that the girls just steal from him at the end and don't even care. Like, they felt bad before and were talking about when they say sorry, but totally ignore their own words later. It's still funny to see them have a civilian who doesn't appreciate their superpower help. Still a goofy episode, and I feel bad for pre-villain Mojo. Next is the second part of episode 5. We start off in the girls' classroom where the teacher mentions some homework due. And the girls don't recall when it was assigned until the teacher points out it was assigned when they were quote-unquote sick, which really means they were out fighting as the Powerpuff Girls Z. The girls fret on the way home about how they would need magic to get all this homework done in time, when Blossom gets an idea. They then go to the lab to beg Ken to make a homework completing machine, which he refuses. The girls try to get on his good side by offering to help him with some stuff. He reluctantly agrees. They take on the job that Ken was supposed to do of delivering a package to the professor and the mayor on a job site. In the package are these special sandals that let you walk on the sides of buildings. The professor made them to help people working on the building construction be more stable in high places. It's to prevent anyone from falling. He specifically mentions that Chemical Z makes the magnets super powerful on the bottom of the shoes. The mayor wants to try them out for himself, so he, Miss Bellum, and the professor all go to scale the tower that's under construction. They start to scale the building when Miss Bellum passes the two men. The mayor is super worn out and begs the professor to just use the elevator. He agrees, but Miss Bellum thinks they're pathetic. We then see Mojo, who's in that terrible shack once again, angry about the new tower that blocks his view. That's when he gets the idea to claim the tower for himself. He then steals a pair of those special shoes off a worker to go climb the building. Meanwhile, the group are admiring the sunset on the top of the tower. The girls talk about how small everything is, and the mayor reflects on how they're looking at all the lives going on down there and how he wants to protect them, and believes in the girls to be able to do that. That's when Mojo shows up and tells them to all leave his base. Being tired from climbing, he decides he's just gonna smash it down with a crane so it's shorter for him. The group freaks out and the mayor calls the lab to get Ken to have Peach call for the girls. See, this system is super inconvenient for them. The girls are literally right there, but because they need Peach in order to transform, it becomes a delayed reaction. Like, imagine if Ken never got the call. Mojo was literally going to make them fall to their deaths. Anyways, Ken stops working on the homework robot and tells Peach to call for the girls. They then transform. The girls fly up to get Mojo, but he starts swinging his crane at them. They all easily dodge his attacks. This, of course, makes Mojo upset. He then starts attacking the tower again, and some debris falls. Bubbles catches a few pieces, but one beam hits the elevator that the adults are escaping in. Professor starts to fall straight out of the elevator once it's hit, but Bubbles and Buttercup catch him. Buttercup complains that they can't get close to Mojo with that crane until she gets the idea to use special shoes. They then scale the side of the crane. He is unable to reach the girls climbing up to him. Once they get to the top, the fight travels to the side of the crane. But for some reason, their magnet shoes get stuck to the side of the crane. We then see the cords of the elevator are snapping, causing the mayor, Miss Bellum, and the professor to start hurtling towards the ground. Also, why did Bubbles and Buttercup put the professor back in the damaged elevator? They should have dropped him off on solid ground. That was such a bad move on their part. Anyways, somehow Blossom gets free and uses her yo-yo to hold the elevator belt steady, but is struggling with all her might to hold them up. Mojo sees a chance to attack Blossom till she realizes that she's wearing a magnet, so it should repel other magnets. She has a big brain moment and uses her foot to deflect Mojo's kick, since they both have the magnet shoes on. This works, but Blossom loses grip and the elevator starts falling again. Then Bubbles uses her sticky bubbles to catch the elevator. The girls attack Mojo, but this time he puts up more of a fight. Then once he's distracted, they just beat him up again and send him flying. We then end up back at the lab as the girls want to see their homework robot, and Ken tells them it's ready. They just need to wear those shoes from earlier first. That's when they end up in a robot desk that forces the girls to do homework by keeping them stuck in the desk due to those magnet shoes. Ken even made them stronger magnets than the shoes they were wearing at the tower. The professor sees no issue with the machine that forces the girls to do homework and instead wants to take the design elements from Ken's robot to use at the tower construction. And we end the episode there. This one is a decent episode in my opinion. Due to the main battle plot, I end up forgetting by the end that the girls asked for a homework robot, only for Ken to kind of trick them into using a robot that makes them do homework. It's still funny, and it's good payback for the girls being lazy. As I pointed out before, the idea that the girls can't transform on their own definitely sucks, but I know later they change this in the show. We just have to wait till that happens. But that's where we'll leave off with episodes for today. I hope you enjoyed my recap, and if you want to watch the show for yourself, I highly recommend it. This is just a video where I want to summarize one of my favorite childhood shows and express my thoughts about each episode as they play out. It's funny that I could point out so many continuity errors in the story itself, or in the changes the dub made compared to the original story. I never noticed much of this stuff when I first watched the show, but that doesn't mean I dislike this show. It still holds up in my opinion. It can never replace the original Powerpuff Girls though. To end this video off, I have one more thing I want to talk about when it comes to the Powerpuff Girls Z. And if this video gets popular enough, I might continue this series, and I will follow this format each time where I discuss some episodes and then leave something special for the end. So for this special segment, I want to actually go over something I own from the Powerpuff Girls Z franchise. I actually own the original soundtrack of the Powerpuff Girls Z show, and I want to share it with you all. It's got some really neat concept art in the booklet on it, and I think it'd be really fun to check out together. So that segment will happen next. Alright, this is my official Powerpuff Girls Z original soundtrack. This is my copy. I don't remember where I got it, but I have it, and it looks pretty cool because you can see on the front it's just a normal CD, but it's got really cute artwork of them. It has the Powerpuff Girls Z wrote out in English, which is surprising because they usually went with Japanese letters. Let's look at the back. The back has a song list, and the first 6 songs I think are the ending and opening themes of the show. Each of the ending songs was like centered towards one of the girls, which was really cool. Also, certified bops. I listen to these songs all the time. I love the opening number. The first one's amazing. The second one's good too, but they later like replaced it and it wasn't as good as the original recording. I don't remember why, but still a good song. The original singer was better. And then this is all like the background music for the show, and they all kind of like lead into each other. It's one of those albums that the music like merges, so it feels like one continuous song, but it's not. And there's a lot of like dialogue thrown in from the show, which is pretty neat. And then this is at the bottom. I'm pretty sure these are like character songs for the last 4. Like this song is their like, oh wait, no. This is Blossom's character song, this is Bubbles' character song, and Buttercup's character song. And then the last song is a group song, and they all sing that one, which is pretty neat. Oh yeah, they actually all sing their own original songs too, so it's pretty neat that they each had their own character song that they sang, which proves their voice actors are pretty versatile. Alright, and I'll show you guys the side. It says Powerpuff Girls Z original soundtrack, and yeah. So here's the cool part. Inside here, oh wait, before I talk about that, they actually wrote it out in Japanese on this side, which is pretty neat. Anyways, if we open it up, there's a poster in here. I'm gonna put a picture of that, probably, because I think it's too big to open up for you guys to see. Oh, maybe not. Poster of them flying around their city. Pretty neat. And then we have, obviously, the CD itself. Nice white. If you still got CD players at home, you can do that. And then the booklet. Before I go in the booklet, I just want to show, too, that the back of this is really cute. Like, that's a nice design, I gotta say. But anyways, now let's get into the booklet. So the booklet's really neat. First off, it's got this cool, like, flip thing here for, like, a background picture. I love how it says it's not magic, it's scientific, because they were created with a chemical. But, moving on. Open it up, it's another cutout. And then we have another cityscape picture. But here's the neat part. Now, I know there's, like, digital scans of this online, where you can, like, see these pictures for yourself with a little more, can take time to look at it, but they have concept art in here for the show, which I think is just so cool. Like, all these different variations. We could have had the show look more like Chibi's, like the original style, or they had these really cute outfits. I love these ones. Or just different variations of how the girls could have looked. It's just so cute, and I love seeing it. Oh my gosh, I still think these outfits are so cute. They're very different with the colors, but oh my gosh, it's just adorable to see what they came up with. These ones are super cute too. I love the different hairstyles. See, they could have kept Buttercup more girly. And then they were gonna have the characters have little, like, chibi buddies, kind of like Miraculous Ladybug has, like, the Kwamis, that were gonna follow them around, but they only ever used these for the title sequence cards, which kind of sucks. And then these were, like, prototype casual outfits for them, which I also think are super cute. And Bubbles would have carried around Octi a lot more. And then we have prototypes for the other characters. Like, Ken would have looked so different. I'm kind of glad they didn't give him glasses. The only thing they thought of for Professor Utonium was to give him a mini, like, ponytail. I don't know why. And then we have different variations of Peach, the robot dog. I like what they went with. And the mayor and Miss Bellum and Miss Keen. Man, they were gonna give Miss Bellum an actual face. That would have been so weird. And then some monsters like Mojo. Man, they came up with some really unique ideas, like Mojo like haunting some kid. That's so funny. And then later we will see him in the story, so this is a prototype design. I like how they say it's PPGZ Family and Friends. Later we see the Rowdy Rough Boys. Apparently they almost were going to be Super Saiyan. And then also the Gangrene Gang, which is a carryover as well. Rowdy Rough Boys are too, but a lot of the enemies in the show are also carried over from the original Powerpuff Girls. And then we got a picture of the main cast just in here in their default designs for the credits and all that. So I don't know, I just think it's really cool. I always wanted this CD as a kid because I thought it was super neat to just have like a piece of merch from the show, and now I can say I do, so it's pretty neat. I don't know if you can really get a hold of this kind of thing anymore much, but yeah, I thought it'd be fun to share. I hope you guys enjoyed. Well, I hope you enjoyed that last segment of this video, and I want to thank you all for making it to the end. If you like this sort of episode summary style of video, be sure to give this video a like. That lets me know that you want more videos like this, and I'd be more than happy to talk about the next 5 episodes of this series. If you want to stay up to date on any future videos I make, whether it's about Powerpuff Girls Z or not, be sure to subscribe, as I'm going to try to be a more content-focused creator from now on. And if you want to see what the next topic I talk about after reviewing the next 5 episodes, you'll just have to like and subscribe to make sure I make that video. If it's popular enough, I'll do it. Anyways, peace out.